The title is Going Local, Public Spending, Bureaucratic Efficiency and Decentralization. Actually, what I'll present today I'll present some preliminary results, even if we've been working on this project for a long time, because as I'll try to present today, it's a complex project, so there are many difficulties in carrying it out. So we changed also our mind several times, so any comment is welcome. Okay. Let me start with presenting in a nutshell what is the research question, and then I'll go back to the background, the literature, and so on. Okay, so in general, in this particular paper, we carry out a policy evaluation study that analyzes the causal impact of a major decentralization reform that occurred in Italy in 2001. And this reform affected only, so it affects many layers of the government, especially regions, but also affected municipalities. In particular, concerning municipalities, it affected only municipalities belonging to ordinary status regions. While as you know, as I'll tell you later, in Italy we have a few regions that have special status and 15 that have ordinary status, and this reform affected mainly or only ordinary status regions. So we will exploit some, let's say, some source of exogeneity to try to answer two key research questions. The first one is, do municipal administrations matter to determine local economic development? And the other one is that what happens when municipal politicians and bureaucrats receive more powers and responsibilities? So the first idea is to see what happens in general, let's say on average, when you give more power, more responsibilities to local authorities, either politicians or bureaucrats. And then we will investigate whether these impacts might be heterogeneous in terms of bureaucratic quality or politicians' quality. Okay, I'll be more precise later on. But let me start with some background. So also to give you an idea why this research question is relevant. As we all know, over the last decades, in most countries, most developed countries, especially in Europe a lot, the decentralization was a policy that has been reshaping governments all over the most developed countries. So in general, most countries, and Italy is not an exception, also in Italy this occurred, there were several reforms aimed to give more power to regions or local governments. When I say more powers, I mean either political, administrative, or fiscal, okay, or all together. And in general, what is the idea? The idea is that if I give more power to local areas, this in theory, we expect that this should better meet the population's need. So in theory, the public goods provision should be enhanced. Okay, we should have a better public goods provision. But and several countries are still considering these policies, also, even if in some countries there are also other views, and possibly more decentralized countries are also going a little bit back to a more centralized government. There have been many theoretical and then empirical studies on this matter. But before showing these studies, I would just like to give you an overview, at least for the European Union. This is the centralization index computed by the EU. These are all the 27 EU member states. And you can see this is just an overview. What are, according to this index, the countries that are more decentralized? And of course, the main the highlight is Germany with a federal government, and also the countries that are less decentralized. We can see that Italy is somewhat in the middle, but we have all the eastern countries, that Romania, Bulgaria, and so on, that are quite centralized. So as I was saying before, we have several, there have been very influential papers, studies in the theoretical literature about the impact, the expected impact of decentralization. So there's this trend of literature is called the first generation theories of federalism. And we have the seminal papers by Thibault, Olson, and Oates. And they view government as a benevolent agent, okay, these theoretical models. And they highlight the likely benefits of decentralization. So according to their theoretical model, more decentralization, a federal state should lead to higher efficiency of mobilizing and reused resources, stronger match with local preferences, and also it should give political incentives and higher accountability of local authorities. Okay, so in theory, local politicians should feel more responsible, and this should enhance their contribution to the local development. So according to this literature, decentralization countries and regions will produce better public services, okay? Will produce better public policies, and this will enhance local development. But after a few years, there were so the empirical about this, let's say, this theoretical prediction was kind of mixed. So this pushed another strand of literature that has been later called the second generation theories of federalism to highlight what are the problems with decentralization. Okay. So according to these papers, and here I mentioned three of the most famous ones, so Seabright, Lockwood, and Oates, they depict a world where political and fiscal institutions work under imperfect information, okay? And political agents have their own objective function, okay? Which doesn't necessarily meet is in line with the actual the good for the people they govern. There are many examples of why things can go wrong with federalism, and then this means that possibly there are no such great benefits of federalism, and even things can even go worse than a centralized government. This may be to race to the bottom, rent-seeking behavior, coordination issues. For instance, we've seen many times that also different layers of government, they dispute about who is responsible for this thing and the other, or they blame each other about some things that do not go well, and also possibly scale these economies. So according to this second strand of literature, there is the way that the impact of decentralization will depend very much on fiscal incentives and also on the actual behavior of local politicians. So while the first generation theories, they all predict better policies, better local policies, these second generation theories, their predictions are mixed. Then there have been other studies, more at the, let's say, at the local level, that contribute to the role of decentralization, to the expected impact of decentralization. For instance, this paper by Proudhon in 1995, again a theoretical paper, assumed a pure decentralization of fiscal federalism. Okay, so a type of government that at least in Europe it doesn't exist. But let's assume that we have a pure decentralization of fiscal federalism without a regional equalization fund. In that case, if we have this kind of model in mind, richer regions with a larger tax base will be able to raise more financial resources and finance local public goods at lower rates than poorer ones. Okay, so this will likely enlarge the regional and local disparities between regions and between municipalities. Moreover, all else being equal, the decentralization of taxes and expenditure is likely to lead to a concentration of growth in a few urban locations. And we can see that probably some of this prediction actually up and was already there in the 90s, but this kind of trend increased over the last few decades. And also another consequence that maybe at the time was not that evident is that if we increase regional disparities, this might lead to also to some kind of protest, also political protest, and we have all the literature about the places that don't matter started with some influential work in here. I report one of the most famous one, Rodriguez post 2018. However, until now, I didn't mention very much the role of bureaucratic efficiency quality. And the first paper that introduced theoretically the role of bureaucratic quality in the development of local entities was the Huber and McCarthy paper in 2004. So they introduced bureaucratic capacity in their theoretical model of delegation. And basically, they show that local institutions better endowed with bureaucratic capacity might have a higher chances of delivering better local policies. And of course, it was the opposite for a local institution with low level of bureaucratic capacity and quality. So in general, according to this theoretical prediction and also some paper by Rodriguez, Pos, and Mustra, in general, difference in quality, in government quality are bound to have far greater effects in countries with a greater level of government quality polarization. So let's say that we have a very heterogeneous country, and we would expect that in that country, more decentralization will increase disparities in the provision of public goods in case of more decentralization. So what if decentralization effects are heterogeneous in the institutional factors? Okay, so it's important to consider it. So let's say that this is the case, that this is possibly the case. Also, according to the theory, this might be the case. In this case, pre-existing differences in bureaucratic performance might amplify territorial disparities by granting greater power to local administration. And I will show you that in Italy there are these very heterogeneous areas. On decentralization, there have been also many other studies that look at specific aspects. Okay, so let me show you. Let me mention a few of the most relevant ones, and I will present what is our contribution to this specific strand of literature. So, for instance, in this case, other theoretical and empirical studies they focus on the degree of decentralization and regional quality of government. So the relationship between decentralization and quality of government. And for instance, some of them find that devolution leads to quality of government improvement, while others suggest that decentralization leads to higher rates of economic growth when coupled with high administrative and political decentralization. Also, then there is a more mixed evidence about the impact of devolution on the variability of government quality. For instance, according to Tanzi, there is a positive impact, while according to Sharon et al., there is no such an impact, let's say a negligible impact. And also the gains of decentralization might accrue also to neighboring regions. And finally, also fiscal decentralization might promote regional governments in higher government quality settings, by leads to wider regional disparities. So basically all of these papers, so I'm talking about the empirical ones, they all look at the regional level, because basically it's very difficult to have a measure of bureaucratic quality, politicians' quality at the more local level, let's say at the municipality level. So our contribution to this literature is that we will look at municipal level quality of the bureaucrats and of the political aspects of the local government. And we will also use a measure of quality that does not depend on perception. So we all know that the very famous, very influential Quality of Government Index by Charron and co-authors and many others is based on perceptions. So it's also available only in a few years, so 2010, 2013, and so on. And the availability of such an aggregated measure at the regional level, and the fact that it's not available every year and it's based on perceptions, this might cause some limitation in the possibility to exploit this measure to carry out a causal impact, to reply to the causal questions we have in mind. So as I will show you in a minute, we will look at the municipal level, and I will explain why, how we managed to create an index at the municipal level. Then there is another strand of literature. Let's say that ideally we try to contribute to these two strands of literature, that these are the studies on the political economy of local governments and local bureaucracies. In here we have a very influential recent study by Pelodi and co-authors that still in Italy, that looks at the consequences of populism on municipal economic performance and quality of bureaucracy. And they use some of the data we also use, and they will be more precise when I present the data. Then we have also some evidence that the effects on local politician skills and local government effectiveness on populist vote, association between more competent mayors and better policies in case of low quality of informal institutions. So this paper by Carreri says that basically when the quality of informal institution is low, it matters very much the quality of the politician, let's say the mayor, that can affect very much the local development of the area. And also there might be unintended adverse consequences of place-based policies. For instance, in regions with many low-skilled workers, EU funds are significantly less likely to be invested in technological development. Basically, we do not really look concerning this trend of literature. We do not look only at politicians. We look at them, but not only at them, but we take into account the administrative dimension. So basically, all the people, all the bureaucrats that work in the municipalities, and they work there possibly also for their whole career, not like politicians that maybe are there just for 5 years or so on, maybe 10 if they are re-elected and so on. So a bit of framework. So we're talking about Italy. So we have 20 regions, 15 are ordinary status regions, and we have 5 special status regions. And basically these special status regions, we have 3 in the north, Valle d'Aosta, Trentino Alto Adige, and Friuli Venezia Giulia, and 2 in the south that are the 2 islands, Sardinia and Sicily. And they have been made special, let's say, just after the end of the Second World War. 4 of them, while Friuli Venezia Giulia was made special in the 60s. And basically the reason for this special status was linguistic minorities, insular features, separatist pressures, especially after the Second World War. And so in the Constitution, in the Italian Constitution, there was a specific aspect concerning these regions. So in general, these regions had always greater margins of the administrative and fiscal autonomy. So they were already decentralized, let's say, these 5 regions, and also the municipalities belonging to them. Then we have the provinces in Italy. Even if the provinces, so between the regions and the municipalities, we have the provinces, the layer, but the provinces lost power over the last few decades, and let's say that their impact on local development is considered minor with respect to regions and municipalities. And then we have municipalities. So we have almost 8,000 municipalities in Italy, of which 1,300 belong to special status regions. And they are responsible for a lot of local services, for instance, waste management, early child care and schooling, local police, transportation, social services, some environmental policies, of course, not all environmental policies, culture, urban planning, and local economic development. So Italy was except for the 5 special status regions, Italy was quite a centralized country until the 90s. And especially, let's say, from the end of the 80s and in all the 90s, there was a big pressure in some regions, especially in the northern regions, to to give more power to local governments, either municipalities or regions. And this pressure was represented also politically by the Northern League. So Northern League, known in Italy as Lega Nord and now known just as Lega, was at the time was a very influential political party that in the elections in the 90s reached even the 10% of the votes, but in the northern region they reached even more than 30% of the votes, and they were aiming for secession. Okay, so they wanted to split Italy into the north and then the center-south. Then, of course, when they reached a more government position, they changed a little bit their aim. Okay, so it was they didn't manage to have secession, luckily, but they managed to push for a more federal state. Okay? So, and all these pressures led to many attempts in the 90s to reform the Italian constitution. And then in 2001, just before actually the election, and actually was at the time was in charge a left-wing government, there was the 2001 constitutional reform. Okay, this reform was also made politically because in order, so with the idea to argin the Northern League, okay, to say, okay, we give you something in that way that you have less power in your political agenda. But so in this constitutional reform was the first time, this was a very similar reform because it was the first time that the constitution was modified from 1948. And this constitutional reform had basically reshaped the Italian regional state by changing the way powers are distributed among levels of government. So basically, in 1948, the Constitution, the fifth title of the Constitution said, La Repubblica si riparte in regioni, province, and comuni. So the Republic is split in regions, provinces, and municipalities, while in 2001, with the new title, fifth title, we have the Republic is made up of municipalities, provinces, regions, and the state. Okay, it's a change of perspective. So now we basically it's been recognized also the autonomy, at least partial autonomy of municipalities, provinces, and regions with respect to the central state. So this has been a major decentralization reform in Italy that occurred in 2001. Of course, there have been some changes even in the 90s. For instance, in 1993 was introduced a policy that allowed for a direct election of the mayors, while before you had just the election, then the mayor was elected later after, okay, not directly by the citizens. While, and also some fiscal changes happened even in the 90s, a little bit, but the big reform is this one, the 2001. So basically, another big aspect of this reform was that considering administrative functions, okay, so the functions that are basically managed by the bureaucrats that work in the municipality, the reform introduced the principle of subsidiarity, okay? Because they had to follow the EU law. This was part of all the changes that Italy had to make in order to enter into the euro, for instance. So after the reform, these functions, the administrative functions, must now be carried out by the institutions closest to the citizens, which are the municipalities, of course, unless they are attributed to the provinces, metropolitan, and so on. So basically, if there is a public policy that is not specified, that is, let's say that it's should be should concern only the state of the regions, then the municipalities are in charge of this administrative function. So this is a big change due to reform. And also the financial autonomy of the regions and the local authority has also been strengthened. Of course, regions and especially municipalities continue to receive money from the central state, because they had no autonomy, but their autonomy was strengthened. Okay, so they had to raise taxes by their own, and they had to cover a higher share of their expenditure. So I was saying the constitutional reform took place in 2001 and established a new setup for dividing legislative and administrative powers between the central state and the subnational level of governments. In particular, two clauses were changed. Clause 118, so appointed municipalities with the primary scope of the administrative role, while clause 119 calls for the municipal fiscal autonomy. So municipalities finance their duties and public good provision with their own resources. Okay, so they had the chance to impose extra taxes for self-financing. And this is also a relevant aspect in a country like Italy, in which the income per capita is quite heterogeneous. No? So we have the north, which is relatively rich, while the south relatively poor. And such a change is relevant, and this will also be evident when I show you some of the estimates. And the other key thing for our analysis is that special status regions kept the responsibility for the administrative role in public services. So basically, for just this aspect, basically the municipalities in ordinary regions were even more decentralized than the municipalities in the special status one, but only for this aspect. Of course, even after the reform, the special status regions enjoyed more freedom, but let's say that this reform didn't affect much them, while affected a lot what happened in the ordinary status regions. Okay, so after the reform, so before the reform was not like this, but after the reform, municipalities in ordinary status regions could eventually set and allocate funding for the following policies. So according public works, energy, renewable energy sector, transportation, school buildings, economic activities, waste collection, industrial sector, and so on. And also the direct planification and management of waste collection and nursery schools. So, and probably I should have anticipated this map, even if probably most of you are familiar with this map. So we have the special status regions in the north, Valle d'Aosta, Trentino Alto Adige, Friuli, and then the two regions in the south. And also it's important to note that the constitutional reform needed a referendum, and the referendum was positive, and almost 2 out of 3 Italians voted in favor of the reform. Basically, what we do, we try to exploit let's say the fact that some ordinary regions are close to special status regions, and the reform affected only ordinary regions, and we try to we carry out a counterfactual analysis to estimate what would have happened to the municipalities in ordinary regions if they had not received more power, more autonomy, and so on. Okay? So we try to gauge the causal effect of this reform using untreated municipalities in the special status regions that already benefited of this decentralization. Of course, this is not a canonical counterfactual analysis, because we are comparing. Let's say we are comparing the newly treated areas with the always treated areas, basically. This is not canonical, but this is not, we have many options. Okay, so this is probably also one of the reasons why there are no actual So even if the reform was so huge, so relevant, there are no papers about it. Okay, so we have no causal papers about the impact of this reform. So we aim to estimate the average treatment effect of this reform, and also, of course, exploit the heterogeneity of the impact in case. So because potentially the impact will be heterogeneous depending on the initial level of the bureaucratic capacity and quality, and also politicians' one. So we test whether this impact is really heterogeneous or not. To do so, we created a comprehensive data set covering the period from 1998 to 2007. So basically, it's not possible to go to retrieve balance sheet data before 1998. So you can retrieve some data, but just let's say 4 or 5 variables. So just the capital expenditure, current expenditure, total revenues, and that's it, basically. But from 1988 later on, it's possible to extract from the balance sheet data information about services, about detailed information about revenues, and so on. I will present the data later on. But just to give you an idea why we started in 1988, ideally we would have started even before, in order to create a more realistic, even more realistic counterfactual. And then we stopped in 2007. Why would we stop that? For 2 reasons. One, the Great Recession that might have affected some outcomes, and also because there were other reforms that affected local governments. So later on, it would have been possible that the impact after 2007 would have been due to other reforms. Okay, so we basically estimated the short and, let's say, at most medium-term effect of the reform, because this is the maximum we can do. Okay, so these are the data we cover. So we made a strong effort about the data, and I hope that this will be, you can see this. So we covered the data from several sources. The first one, the main one, is municipal balance sheets that, especially at the time, were kind of difficult to analyze because for one reason, there was the problem with euro lire at the time, because we were entering the euro. So some municipalities had the balance sheets in lire, others in euro, and even the same municipality might have saved some might have put some data in euro and other in lira. Okay, so this happened in some municipalities. So it was difficult to clean this data, but we managed to retrieve some key variables like transfer, fiscal revenues, current capital expenditure. We also know, for instance, the current expenditure for nurseries, for waste collection, and so on, and similar things for capital expenditure. Then we have also a big and very detailed data set on mayoral and local politicians' characteristics. So we know basically if they have a degree, if they were or they are still white collar, and so on. Also their age, their gender, and I will be more specific on how we exploit this information. Then, and this is a kind of a novelty with respect to most of the literature, except for Bellodi et al. That I mentioned before, we also retrieve all the data on the bureaucrats. Okay, so we know the people, the characteristics of the people that work in the municipalities. We know their education, we know their age, their gender, and so on. Then we have also a measure, and this is a novelty, a total novelty, was never used before in no other paper. We have a measure of municipal administrative performance. So we have the number of applications processed as a fraction of the total application received, and we also create an index based on this measure. And this measure has never been used before. And it gives you an idea of let's say the bureaucratic capacity / quality, depends on how you see it. Then we have data on actual services, not just how much you spend on the service, but the data on let's say, the quantities. Okay, so total waste collection weight, number of street lamps, and some other, also something about the schools. In theory, we could have also other variables, but as I mentioned before, the data sometimes are very noisy, and it's not that easy to retrieve all these variables. But we are working on it. The idea is to try to cover all the services that were in charge of the municipalities. Then we have also data on, of course, on the census and other economic data, even if they are not central to the application. Okay. I briefly mentioned before how we managed to carry out the evaluation strategy, but now I'll be more specific. So basically, what we do, let's consider it like a diff in diff. Okay, difference estimator, but with some tweaks. So we use the non-parametric, so the matching-based difference estimator proposed by my and co-authors. I really like this method because it's very transparent. You know which are how you are building the counterfactual. So basically, in this case, what are we doing? We select for each treated municipality. Let's imagine just one treated municipality, but the same applies to all treated municipalities in an ordinary status regions, a set of control municipalities in a special status regions that belong to the same geographical area. So let's say that they are all in the north. Right? I'm comparing municipality in Lombardy with municipality in Friuli, for instance. Population category, this is relevant because, of course, it's different to manage a municipality with 2,000 inhabitants with respect and a municipality with 30,000 inhabitants. Okay, it's very different. And also in Italy, because in Italy we have lots of many small municipalities, especially in the areas that are more peripheral. And also we also take into account the pre-treatment, so the pre-treatment bureaucratic quality using the index that I'll present after this slide. So basically, we are doing an exact matching on these three variables. And then we also add as an additional requirement the traditional diff in diff. So we are matching each treated municipality only with untreated municipality that have a similar pretreatment trend with respect to Y and possibly other covariates. How do we select the most similar one? Using the Malanobis distance that is based on the trend. Okay, so instead of matching on the value, you match on the trend. Because in here, the idea is that we are comparing treated and untreated municipalities that are following similar trends, not that have similar values. Also because, as I mentioned before, for instance, if we talk about capital expenditure, municipalities in special status regions spend lots more money than the others. So we can only rely on trends. And then, so we select three nearest neighbor, and we create basically an individual treatment effects. And then when you average all the individual treatment effects, you get the average treatment effect on the treated. Okay, this is how we create the bureaucratic politician quality index. We use many covariates. In particular, we use 9 covariates. Let me show you here. So we have we consider average years of education, number of bureaucrats per 1,000 inhabitants, average number of day off, turnover rate, gender balance index, technical office efficiency. As I mentioned, this is the first time that it's been used this. And you can see as the polarity. So basically, if we see polarity plus, means that we expect that this variable is positively associated with quality. Okay, so with the variable, with the latent variable, we are trying to we would like to estimate. So of course, we expect that more education of the bureaucrats will lead to higher quality. While we expect that if they have lots of day off, this will be detrimental to quality and so on. We also consider politicians because, of course, they can also shape how the things go in terms of economic development and services. So we consider the average years of education, gender balance index, and proportion of white-collar workers. Okay? We have a companion paper. Now we do not have to show you. So we created a paper. I would just show you one map. So basically, let's just look at these two maps here, the pillar 1 and pillar 2. So basically, we have a separate paper that explains how we created an index for Italian municipalities, an index of quality from 2001 to 2022. Here, this is let's say the picture of concerning 2001. So in pillar 1, we have quality and capacity of the bureaucracy, while in pillar 2 we have
a question, or sorry for interrupting.
Sorry,
no.
Yes, you can ask for me.
If I may, I found this picture a bit surprising, the map you're showing here, and I stumbled over it when I saw it the first time, because, I mean, if my understanding of geography Italy is not misled, it's particularly the Trentino-Bolzano region that seemed to perform very bad, which would contradict fully what is the findings of the quality of government index we are running here at European level, at the regional level, since many years, since 2007. Okay, it's many years after, but there's a certain kind of inertia in it, so I don't think that a lot have changed. So it's a bit striking, if I may. Of course, the fiscal and economic performance, they're performing nicely. As you said, they have a high share of capital investments for whatever reason. So, but the other three indicators sounds, and if I may, also the number of years of formal education might not necessarily, I mean, the work at municipal level is hands-on. It's not quantum physics, not rocket science. It's about being motivated, being committed, being sociable, having the right values, basically. So it's not necessarily really, you don't need a study of math to be a good local bureaucrat, so to say. So I'm wondering whether this indicator, just as a kind of side question, but I want to leave it also, of course,
yes,
discussion afterwards.
No, I think. I don't hear anything.
I'm over. I'm over to you, Beck.
Okay,
sorry.
Okay. Thank you, Benedict. So no, your comment is correct. I was when I was working on the companion paper, I was struck as much as you are now about this. But basically, so there are so basically you already explained why this might happen. So let's say in that pillar we are using only the first so 4 of these, not all of them. So we're using we use the first 4. So the average years of education, number of bureaucrats, average number of days off, and turnover rate. So basically, of course, these are objective measures, but as you were suggesting, there may be some other measures that are basically not possible to capture with objective data. And also, but at the same time, it's also impossible to capture them with subjective data, no? Because we have no perception of the quality in a single municipality of 2,000 inhabitants. No, it's impossible. So, of course, what we create an objective measure of it that tries to capture what we can capture with data. Of course, all that is left that you can also see here, no? So we see that, we are low quality, and then when I look at the economic performance, I see high economic performance. No? This probably due to this, no? What you were suggesting, that there are other things that we cannot really measure. So this index also highlights some of the limitations of this kind of, but at the same time gives at least gives a picture that we didn't have before of how we can measure. Okay, so we see this mostly as a starting point rather than an end point of our research in the impact of municipal quality. And so we are really interested in doing this, and we are working on other. We are continuing to work on this project. So we do not consider also this companion paper as a final project, but we are still an ongoing project.
If I may, one more, because it's really, I mean, this is a bit striking. If you look at Sicilia, I guess any one of us who has been in Sicilia the last 20 years knows exactly this cannot be so green as it is here on the map. For God's sake.
Yeah, but this was due to the fact that they hired so many bureaucrats, okay, because of other reasons. And if we use just this, you will get this picture, of course. But when you look at the economic performance, you see that is not like all green. Okay, like however, what I didn't show you here, but we are using in this paper is this measure here. Okay, that we think is quite an important one. We're still, I didn't have time to map it, so I will do it soon, but still we didn't have time to map it, which is the technical office efficiency. Okay, this gives an idea on how good are institutions to process the demand of the people, of the governments, and so on. Okay? So we really put a lot of good intention in this, in the addition of this variable. Actually, this variable was not used in the other paper because this variable is only available for a few years. So while the intent of this paper was to create, was to map Italy for 20 years, this was not possible with this variable. So we had to exclude it just for this reason. But we think that this is a very important variable. But thanks for the comment. Okay, so we have this companion paper. We are just proposing an index and to see how it's possible to measure local governments. Of course, we cannot use perception because we don't have it. But this is just a first attempt to do. And we are not aware of paper that do similar things in other countries. But we really think that there should be more research on this type of research question, because many papers you see that they use just a single proxy. So now in here you see 9, no? So maybe in a paper you see, okay, I'm using bureaucrats, I'm using education of politicians, I'm using just one measure. Okay, so we think that at the very least it's important to do an attempt to create a more comprehensive measure of quality and capacity of local governments based on a larger set of variables that can better capture the quality. Okay, just let me move to the results. So average results, these are, so basically with the method I mentioned, you can also create some kind of event studies that probably some of you are familiar with this kind of graphs, I don't know, because maybe they've used Deschamps-Martin and Estimator or Callaway-Santana, or also some of the synthetic control method. But we've used this non-parametric measure. This is why we do not have pre-treatment confidence intervals, but we have just post-treatment confidence intervals, which are the impact, because this is a non-parametric measure. And actually, it would be impossible even to measure them, but you should add to the method some kind of bootstrap, but with them that was not there in the package. So what would we find? We find that the current expenditure after reform decreased. So we have in here the treated region, the treated municipalities, and here the control municipalities. So basically, there was a negative impact on current expenditure per 100 inhabitants, while the impact on capital expenditure is mixed, let's say. And if we look at total revenues, we see a slight decrease in total revenues. Let me go back just a second, because I didn't tell you one key thing. So in this paper, we are analyzing the north and south separately. So what I show you before right now is all together, but then I will show you the estimates separately. So for the north, we consider only the 2 regions that are neighbors to Trentino Alto Adige and Friuli Venezia Giulia, while in the south we consider we do not have boundaries because they are islands. So we consider the only other regions that were convergence regions in 2000, okay, which are Campania, Puglia, Basilicata, and Calabria. So these are the treated ones versus the 2 special status regions. So we carry out analysis in the north and analysis in the south. What I show you at the beginning is the average impact. Okay, then I will show you the impact by area, which are also different. So if I show you the impact by area, we see that while the overall impact on current expenditure is negative, it's much negative in the north, while it's positive in the south. If we look at capital expenditure, we see that it's negative more in the north than in the south, while in the south is more negative than positive than negligible. These are the impact over time. And you can see also that some of the estimates are not really stable. Okay, so you do not see a monotonic increase or a monotonic decrease. And then we have the impact on total revenues. Overall revenues, we see that there is a decrease in the north and an increase in the south. We also investigated how this happened, especially according to the revenues. So if we see the revenues in the north, as I mentioned, they were negative, while in the south they were slightly positive. And two of the components of the revenues are fiscal revenues and transfer. So we see that if we look at fiscal revenues, we see a big increase in the north and a decrease in the south. Why is that? Because basically, so after the reform, the municipalities started to get directly the money from the taxes, also the tax on the income, part of the tax on the income. And as in the north, the people are on average richer, municipal governments in the north are got more money. At the same time, if we look at the transfer that come from the regions, but mostly from the central government, we see that the central government reduced the amount of money given to northern municipalities, but increased those to the weakest, let's say, municipalities that are those in the south. So we are still investigating the results, but these are quite consistent. Also, we tried different specifications. These results stand in every kind of analysis. Then I also show you some preliminary estimates on services. In particular, we focus on three aspects. So this is the kilogram waste collected per inhabitant, street lamps per 100 inhabitants, and nursery school per 10,000 inhabitants. So this is just the number of nursery schools. So again, the solid line is treated municipalities. The dashed one is the counterfactual. We see that in all cases, the impact is negative. In some cases, even statistically significant. This is the impact on average. If we look at services, we see that there is a big drop in the waste collection in the south, while this did not happen in the north. If we look at street lamps, we see a negative impact in general in both areas. And we see that the nursery school, also because in most municipalities there were no nursery schools because they are very small, we see no impact or negative or no impact. This is the fine. So this is the where we are right now in the paper, in the investigation of if the impact changes for different with respect to our measure of quality, of pretreatment measure of quality. So basically, let's look at this graph here, the north for street lamps. We see the darkest line represent the impact of the municipalities with higher quality for the higher bureaucratic politicians' quality, while the lightest color is the low quality. These groups are split by tertiles. Okay, so the first tertile is low quality, second tertile medium quality, and then we define as high quality. So we see that at least in the north, there seems to be a more positive impact in areas with higher quality. If we look at the south, we see not such thing. We see more mixed trend. So in some cases, the low quality seems to perform better than the others, while the opposite happens for street lamps. As I told you before, these are very preliminary results. They are subject to change, and yes, this is where we are with the research right now. Let me conclude with the final slide, and then possibly if there are some questions, or comment, I will be very happy to receive them. What we have in mind is that to add some other variables. So far we've looked just street services. We are also creating other variables to to take into account the services. For instance, rather than looking at just how much waste you collect, we also look at the cost per kilogram, for instance, or something like this, to see if the changes the efficiency of the local government. And same things we can do for street lamps, nursery school, and so on. Also, there are many noisy data, so we fixed most of them, but we're still working on some noisy data, especially the smallest municipalities. So in the estimates I show you today, we decided to remove all municipalities below 500 inhabitants, because they are very small municipalities with very volatile balance sheet data. But we do not want to eliminate them. So we want to fix them. Let's say we want to try, we want to see if some of them can be used in the analysis or not. Also, yeah, of course, we didn't check much for the robustness. This is still ongoing. We might also even consider alternative evaluation strategies, even possibly looking some kind of maybe intensity of treatment, just looking at the ordinary status regions. This is a possibility that we are looking at. And also, as I mentioned, so we created this measure of quality, but this is might be even improved or might be changed, so it's subject to change. And then after we managed to do all of this, more comprehensive investigation of all the mechanisms. Thank you.
Thank you, Augusto, for your presentation. We have time for some questions.
If I may, or
Yeah.
I don't want to take the floor of us so quickly. General comment, if I may. Also, Augusto, is extremely interesting stuff what you're doing, and I'm very glad that somebody does it. And Italy is a fantastic case to study because you have the special regions and you have this incredibly fine-grained data. It's fantastic that someone is looking at my concerns regarding the indicators I have already raised. I would like to more a general. This is a plea. It's less a question or recommendations. Kind of when you are going to write the paper, I would be very happy if you would, first of all, elaborate a bit more on exactly what type of local taxes the municipalities dispose of, because at the end of the day, if I'm not mistaken, please forgive me in all my naivety, but in these days, 2089, if I'm not mistaken, this local business tax that Gianluca Bola had introduced in '86 was removed and was done to put to the regional level, or was it in the context of the constitutional reform? So in any case, you have a kind of, suddenly the municipal level had less incentive, less revenue from local economic activity. It wasn't big, this tax, but it was relevant. And the remaining part were only property tax, to most part residential property, only a minor part, the category D, commercial industrial property. So very important. There was almost, and this is a general concern about all the discussion on fiscal decentralization and impact on quality of governments. And this seems to me, as an outsider, I'm coming from experimental economics, I'm not an expert on fiscal federalism and stuff, but I mean, we have to talk incentives. If you want to talk about the social plan at local level, it's about incentives. So is he or she the mayor has the local council motivation, do they get a reward for delivering good service to the local business, to local citizens? And in terms of taxes, it's one thing to be re-elected, man, but if there's no alternative, you have a de facto monopoly. So I think it would be very reasonable to add a paragraph explaining to us, to the readers, exactly what type of taxes the municipalities would dispose of prior and after the reform. Also making possibly clear that the revenue actually from economic related taxes were minimal. Also, this up to 0.8% surcharge on personal income tax, forgive me, I mean, this is laughable. This is nothing in comparison with 100% Nordic countries or Switzerland. And this is just ridiculous. So it's not not to be too rude in my expression. I'm sorry, forgive me, but this would be very helpful, I think. We can have a separate bilateral conversation on it if you want. And finally, one question only: would there be a sense in looking into changes of leadership? I mean, you're covering a period of more than, it's 9 years, so it should be perhaps ideally 2 election period you're covering, and you would have then loads of kind of across the country, the 7,800, possibly usually in this election 10, 15, 20% of the mayors get replaced or local councils get replaced. that you would have, so to say, structural breaks in the quality of the mayors or the character of the mayors within your data set that you might be able to explore for more evidence. Thanks.
Thanks, Benedict. Yes, all you said is right. And the only thing I didn't really know about this business tax change, but we will look into this, the one that you mentioned at the very beginning. Yes, the incentives for local politicians is we thought that we could try to better understand also the mechanism and also possibly only compare municipalities with the same, let's say, election rounds. So they all expected to take election in the same year. This might take into account the potential concern, and we might even exploit what you suggest, the fact that the quality of the politicians might change, at least according to this to the index how we are defining in this paper quality. Yes, thank you. It's much more so, it's much more difficult to find some kind of exogenous change for bureaucrats, because while with politicians we have elections, and you might have some changes also because you cannot be reelected more than twice. With bureaucrats, basically they stay there all the time, and there are no great reform that changed the fact that how they are hired or laid off. So it's much more difficult to find exogenous changing in the bureaucratic quality.
If I may just, sorry, by talking with you, just realize in this, if you have data on the relative revenue share from tax revenues, so I would assume, I think we all would agree that the higher the share from tax revenue, whatever tax, property tax, surcharge on personal income tax, whatever, the total of the budget, the more you might assume that there's a feeling of accountability to the local taxpayers. So the more, as a local council, as a member of a local administration member, I might feel, oh, they might not give me the coffee anymore the next morning in the bar, which is, so to say, if I behave now not appropriately, So maybe you could use this kind of to look into that, whether there's if I may, as living myself my life in a bureaucracy and having now experienced many different bureaucracies, I can tell you they did among us. I mean, this off-record chat now, I mean, the quality of the bureaucracy at the end of the day doesn't play a big role. I mean, it's very much really about motivation. The most stuff what we're doing in the bureaucracy, being a municipal or wherever, it's not really quantum physics. It's about being committed. Exactly, being tenured, of course, allows you to invent all kind of excuse to do nothing, but independent of your educational background, it's about being motivated. If you know that you go to next hour, and the next time you go to the bar, nobody will look at you and nobody will greet you. This is a much stronger motivator to perform well than what is ever. So,
yep. Thank you, Benedict.
Thank you. We have time for other questions. So I have 2 comments. The first about the index of bureaucratic quality. In a way that you construct the index. I don't understand if there is variation over time for a given municipality in this index, and do you use it?
Yes.
Or just fix it the value, the index value at the
reply
date of the report?
Yeah, reply to this one. So basically, in the paper, we report every year, how things change. While in this, so basically, the data about the non-political municipal employees starts in 2001. So we have no data about them before 2001, and so basically we are fixing it. Okay, this is not ideal because maybe there may be some idiosyncrasies in just 1 year, but we have no before. But at least concerning the municipal performance, we have 4 years before. So possibly we could reshape this index and maybe focusing more on this one. giving more weight to this one, and yes, trying to adjust. It's not conventional approach, but it might make sense.
Okay, thank you. And my second question is about interactions, fiscal or municipal interaction, and this interaction seems to be a confounding factor. I mean, I think if you have a variation in spending following the reform in a given municipality, within municipality, doesn't it affect untreated municipalities close to the border? And I think the same goes for a variation in the quality of bureaucracy, but in this case, not really possible because we don't use that, but we can see the same type of interaction in bureaucracy quality.
Yeah. Do you have something in mind how we can possibly take this better into account? So if something, maybe I didn't get the point.
Yeah.
Lionel, probably I didn't get the. Can you repeat possibly the?
Yeah, I think that municipal interaction in spending, for example, could be a confounding factor in your analysis because if we have a variation in spending in treated municipality following the reform, due to the reform, it could be affect also in treated municipalities close to the border, close to these municipalities, which is treated, and could be create some bias in your analysis. Or have you tried to deal with that, or not?
No, but it's something that we need to think better. Yes, to take into account, and that's why also I wrote alternative evaluation strategies, because as I was saying, so another possibility we were considering is that let's take only municipalities in the same region that are all treated, and all of a sudden they become all treated, but we can say that they are treated with different intensities, possibly, no? Because let's say that they have similar characteristics, but they have different quality of politicians, bureaucrats. This might be another. So basically, they have the same setting, the same regional government, but they change in the. So they receive the same treatment, but they have different capabilities to exploit this. So this is another possibility. So in that case, we would leave as a part the special status regions municipalities. I don't know, there are pros and cons in both approaches, and it's not given that you will find consistent results during using completely different things. And if you do not find the consistent results, it's not clear why you do not find the results. So, as I was saying at the very beginning, this is a complex, one of the most complex papers I will ever work on. So, but thank you for the comments. They will help us in clarifying the paper, yes, and to strengthen it.
Thank you. We have time also for other questions, if there are. No more questions? Oh, thank you all, and thank you again, Augusto,
thank you.
For
thank you,
your
Lionel.
presentation. And that's the last seminar for this year, and we have planned all seminar for the next year, and the program is in our website. So thank you again, and